Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of this Eradicator self-feed bit. This is a 2 1/4 inch. These are, these are quite impressive. I actually didn't know about these. I had known about some other pretty impressive bits, such as the plantors, which are just like a really aggressive kind of self-feeding spade bit. This one's a little bit more interesting because it's more like a Forstner bit, but it still is for making large holes in wood quite quickly, where Forstners are, of course, made for making flat bottom and precision holes. What I find interesting about this is its build quality. It uses a 1/2 inch shank, which may have partially limited their popularity because a 1/2 inch hex shank won't fit in most 1/2 inch drill chucks because the distance between the peaks is too far. That's why bits have the 7/16 shank, because the 7/16 hex will fit into any 1/2 inch drill. But it is pretty heavy duty. Somebody did have to grind it to fit in a 1/2 inch drill. But I just thought the quality of this was pretty amazing. We have 2 set screws, what's kind of interesting is it is a double lock shank. There is one set screw which just holds the shank tight. This set screw, this hex is actually drilled in the middle, and that's where the self-feed tip goes into, and then there's the set screw for that. But when you have that set screw in there along with this one, it's actually double locked. A cast aluminum body helps remove heat, and then some very nice jaws. Let's actually zoom in a little bit more on those. We can really see some nice cross hatching. These are beautifully made. I thought something like this would work real well in hardwoods. I have seen a few of these online, so I'll end up collecting some more sizes. I like this 2 1/4 inch. Those are actually little socket head cap screws, 3 of them, bolting these jaws on, so you can pull the jaws off and give them a little bit of a resharpen. Looks like that may have happened here, but I like the idea of this, where it had really nice jaws with a couple of wings and pretty steep relief angles, so that should work out pretty well. A very aggressive beehive. If we compare it to this Milwaukee switchblade, which is about the closest equivalent to this type of bit, just because it has a high-speed steel, they call it a chip lifter. The way these types of self-feed bits work is that these little teeth end up being just a little bit higher up than this cutting edge, so it goes around those outer teeth, just cut the fibers of the wood, and then this sweeps the center part out. That's the same thing that's going on here, because you do have these 2 wings. You just have some really some very different relief angles in there. And of course, the other advantage is these types of bits, you can see that this is not symmetric. Even though this is a very high quality Milwaukee, I believe these are forged bits. When these are running, they kind of wobble around a little bit. Once you're in the wood, it's not really a big deal. But I do like the idea that this one is symmetrically balanced. You know, there's a little bit of an imbalance with the screws, but it's essentially a balanced unit. I should say that these self-feed bits, when they get very large, they do include 2 cutting edges, and they are just a little bit more balanced. This is a 4 5/8 Lennox. They do get pretty expensive in those sizes. A quick note, none of these types of bits, definitely not Forstners or these, are very good for drilling long holes that you need to be straight. If you're drilling a hole through a big section of wood and you want to run a bolt through, that's what auger bits are for, is because when you get the hole, the side of the auger bit ensures that it stays straight all the way through. With any of these types of bits, if you're drilling and you start pushing to the side, it will start drilling to the side. And so if you're not careful and you're wobbling around when you're drilling, you'll have a hole that snakes around. It's sometimes not so helpful. Okay, we're going to be using the Makita hole hog here. This should be sufficient to drill. It's going to be a little bit slow, probably 400, 450 RPM, something like that. You know, modern cordless drills in low gear would probably work just fine, but I'm expecting pretty decent results from this, even at a slightly slower speed. Of course, brace this drill. Obviously. And so that's why you do need to respect more powerful drills. I was prepared for a bind up, that's why I wasn't injured, but now I've got the drill properly braced, and we'll try this again here. Not too bad. I was noticing a loss of self-feeding activity, and the screw got a little bit clogged up. Maybe that's what the beehive shape is for, so I'll have to try this just a little bit more here, make sure I'm braced again. All I have to do is just give it a little bit of pressure and it starts biting right in. And yes, indeed, that's working. The steel teeth on this actually, it's interesting. The aluminum body feels warmer than the actual cutting teeth do. Let's take a quick look at the hole. The chips actually don't look so bad at all. And then as far as the we'll look at the bottom of the hole. The sidewalls are actually pretty good. This is Douglas fir or a soft pine type wood, so but I think with the way those teeth are, they could easily be pretty good for hardwoods. I know self-feed bits can be pretty tough in some hardwoods. Let's take a look at the bottom of the hole in case you may want to use it in a situation where you don't go all the way through. And this is what I was expecting. It gives you, even though it's obviously a self-feed bit, because you can see the deep groove that cuts around. They kind of act like a hole saw first, cut around the edge, but it actually makes a pretty, I mean, it tore out a chunk, but it makes a pretty smooth bottom. There's a hole, but I'm actually pretty surprised. It kind of gives you that Forstner effect. Here's what just like a regular Milwaukee one does, and you can see how it's that one tooth kind of comes around when you stop drilling. You know, you get this big chunk, this big shelf that's left there, and that's why it's called it's not called a cutter, it's called just a chip lifter. And so there's this spiral ramp and then of course the edge. But this bit is actually pretty nice. So there you have it, the Eradicator. I've heard of the planters, but I've never heard of these Eradicators before. But these are pretty premium. I really like the look of these. These are just regular little socket head cap screws, so there's 3 of them. On the smaller sizes, there's only 2, or the really small ones, there's only 1. But on this 2 1/4 inch, you do get 3 cap screws, so I like the way that they're bolted onto the housing. And then the geometry, I don't know if this is from the factory, but there is a slight kind of curvature right here. And then of course that tooth, and then just the way they have a steep rank angle there and this way really do cut pretty smoothly. Although I do find it odd that this screw, and maybe that's just a slight difference between actually having, although I called it a beehive, having one that's just straight walled versus having one that bows out, and this may be the reason. I just think that's a little bit interesting that it was clogging up. Even a relatively slow 300 RPM. But what I had also thought was how the aluminum body actually helps absorb a lot of heat from the cutting edge. It will help these steels from getting quite so hot, and especially under heavy duty usage. I'm kind of surprised that these things didn't really take off more. But then again, consider that because of all the parts here, you have this aluminum housing that has to be cast and then had some machining on it, holes drilled. You have to have this hex shank where you have to make it accept the pilot bit. The fact that even though I like that 1/2 inch hex shank, I mean, it's definitely very rigid drive. It does have a hard time fitting in a lot of 1/2 inch drills. And then the beautiful work on these cutting teeth, it's a lot of work. You've got, 6 little socket head cap screws in there. You got to grind these. You got to drill and counterbore them. You got to tap this body. Those are a lot of extra manufacturing processes, which probably didn't, ended up being their demise. Kind of hard to find information on these, particularly because they're just called Eradicator. And you would think, at least they put USA or something like that on it. But anyway, wanted to just never seen these before. Wanted to bring them to your attention and kind of show what I never really knew was what a more premium and impressive self-feed bit looks like. And this thing really is pretty nice, and I'm happy to add it to my collection and share it with you all. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.